Peace, fam. What's good? Before we get into some heavy stuff, you know what I'm saying? Just want to make sure everything is checking out right. So, just gonna do this real quick. Alright, and let's see here. Exactly what I'm gonna do. Alright, everything seems to look like it's checking out pretty straight. So, also just so you know, the document which you shall be reading, which is Expatriation and Citizenship. Let me pull it up right. Expatriation of Citizenship of the United States. Here it is right here. So let's get this thing going. Boom. So, title of this video is called Alien of African Nativity or African Descent. And before we get into this, I want to, right? Before we get into this, I want to go over a few definitions. Okay? Let's go. First of all, what is an alien? Right? Because there's a reason why I named this particular podcast what I named it. Okay? So just walk with me. What is an alien? An alien is a foreigner, one born abroad, a person resident in one country but owing allegiance to another. In England, one born out of the allegiance of the king. In the United States, one born out of the jurisdiction of the United States and who has not been naturalized under their constitution and laws. Alright, that's what an alien is. So if you have never been naturalized underneath the United States, then you are not a true United States citizen. Okay? You are an alien, not realizing you're an alien, thinking that you need to be a U.S. citizen, or you know, if it's like, oh my God, if I'm an alien, then what type of government protections do I have? Right? So they're telling you now, a person residing in one country but owing allegiance to another. Residing in one country but owing allegiance to another. Okay? The Aboriginals reside here in America, but we do not owe allegiance to any of the kings or monarchs in England. Okay? Just to bring that into definition of African: a native or inhabitant of Africa, a person and especially a black person of African ancestry. Nativity: birth, especially the place, conditions, or circumstances of being born. Nativity, the birth of Jesus. A representation, such as a painting of Jesus after birth. Christmas, a horoscope for the time of one's birth. Okay? So I use this term nativity because we are aliens of either African descent or of African nativity. So being of African nativity has to do with birth, especially the place, conditions, or circumstances of being born. So a person of African nativity is one who is born or birth in a African country. Okay? Nativity. Now, descent, right? African descent. The act or an instance of descending. All right, the slow descent of the scuba divers, as an example. A way down, fashion, a descent with an ice axe. A downward incline or passage, a slope. Okay? Hereditary derivation, lineage, a person of African descent. Okay, so descent has to do with lineage, hereditary derivation, which is like bloodline. Okay, and then all these other definitions you can go into on your own, but I want to stick to the topic. Okay, so once again, when you have time, go back over these definitions to go back so it can bring clear what I'm talking about moving forward. But let's remember alien, a foreigner, okay? A person residing in one country but owing allegiance to another. That means you could have like a Kenyan national who resides over here, but their allegiance is to Kenya still. Like or the last president, all right, Obama. Obama was considered an alien because he was residing in the United States, but he owes his allegiance to Kenya, which makes him not a U.S. citizen. Okay, same thing with Trump. He claims Scottish lineage. Okay, not U.S. citizenship. So let's not digress. Yes, everyone should be working on their own constitution. This will be coming out forthwith, but still got some things to go. Anyway, that's not what I wanted to get into. So let's make this big. We'll make this big. And mind you, this ain't gonna be too long now. Family. I'm going right for the main hitters, okay? And this is very crucial. I'm about to pack me a bowl because this is so crucial. I need my mind relaxed because I don't want to. This topic is so very delicate, okay? That my understanding of it can be fine and dandy, but if I interpret it a specific way, it can mess up someone's whole entire interpretation of what I'm trying to explain, of what the law says, right? So this is very, very delicate. I have to be very delicate in my explanation of this topic because this shit right here is hella crazy. Okay? I don't see any other I don't see anyone else putting up a video about us being aliens. Okay? And it being okay for us to be aliens. That actually we are aliens and we shouldn't be anything else but aliens. Alright? Because we've been so entrenched with the whole, if you're an alien or you're an immigrant, deportation, they're going to send you off somewhere. You know what I'm saying? We need to think about this from an aboriginal standpoint. And
you done with the food?
Yep. It's right there, over there, right?
Look.
And I'm live streaming right now. Okay, so just try to
Where's
keep
the
it
hot dogs?
underneath that thing there.
Yeah. Thank you. Just you look good. You, huh? Yeah, no thanks.
You want the fries?
Yeah.
Okay. So now, nothing wrong with us being aliens. And on top of that, now I've heard plenty of scholars and people who study and different schools of thought mention the fact that we are not Indians. I can actually qualify that now, okay, upon reading this document. And once I'm done with this podcast, I will put a link up for the PDF of this document so you can download it yourself and you can read with your own eyes what I'm reading now. All right, because this ain't my words. Okay? This ain't my words. So let's put this. Why does this need to be here? All right. So, let's continue now. From being naturalized. Who may be naturalized? Who may be naturalized? Requirements for naturalization. Okay? Just to be clear, this is page 98. Okay? On Citizenship of the United States Expatriation. Page 98, section 3. Requirements for naturalization. Who may be naturalized? Okay? Y'all ready? Let me take this hit. All right. Let's do this. Now, the earliest statute provided for the naturalization of free white persons. And this was substantially the law until the adoption of the 14th Amendment and the passage of legislation connected with it, when it was by express terms made to include the Negroes. A number of questions have arisen, however, as to the meaning of the statute, and under the rights of citizenship of individuals, the following races have been determined. All right. Indians, early status. Our earliest naturalization law provided that an alien to be naturalized must be a free white person, and this was substantially the requirement until after the Civil War. The 14th Amendment did not in terms include Indians, and the Act of 1866 expressly excluded them when not taxed. Thus, by early statutes, Indians may not become citizens. A recent decision in Alaska confirmed this by deciding that an Indian is not a free white person or an alien of African nativity or African descent. Hold up. Hold up. Hold up. I don't like them boys watching me, but hold up. What you just said now? What? What? So, Indians are not free white persons or an alien of African nativity or African descent. What is an alien of African nativity and African descent? Let's continue. This is hot. This is hot right here. Now, so Indian is not a free white person or an alien of African nativity or African descent. So maybe we shouldn't get so tight at the Indians when they claim that we are not Indians. Maybe we should not be feeling some type of way. Maybe we shouldn't be feeling some type of way. So let me start from back here. A recent decision in Alaska confirmed this by deciding that an Indian is not a free white person or an alien of African nativity or African descent, and that therefore, unless there were some special legislation on the matter, an Indian could not be naturalized as a citizen of the United States. The Indian in this case being a native of British Columbia who had emigrated into the United States. Okay? The Indian being a native of British Columbia who emigrated into the United States. Okay? If I'm not mistaken, British Columbia is near Canaan Land area or corporate Canada. Right? But Canaan Land, divine name. So, British Columbia, okay, who had emigrated into the United States. And that would make sense because around that area too directly across is Asia. Okay, so that would mean that the Manchurians or the Asiatics who were traveling over here to do commerce, when they came across who? British Columbia, the colonizers who came in that area, had sex, produced offspring. Those offspring are what we call today Indians. All right, which are not free white persons or an alien of African nativity or African descent. Let's go back though. What is an alien? An alien is a foreigner. A foreigner. All right? Don't forget that tip. All right, so let's keep on going now. And just so we're clear, let's look up the term immigrated, right? Because I don't want no confusion. None. None. Immigrate. That's immigration. I want exactly immigrate. There we go. No! It's immigration. Immigrate. Let's go back to what we had before. Okay. Let's rock this one. Immigration is the act of removing oneself from a country to another with an intention not to return. Immigration is the act of removing oneself from a country to another with an intention not to return. It will not be renunciation of one's nationality for another citizenship. It will not be renunciation of one's nationality for another citizenship. Immigration is mere removal of person and property to another country. It is the act of leaving a home country to find residence in some other country, like Americans looking for residence in the United States. That would be immigration. EMI, not immigration. We're not immigrants. All right? There has been immigration, though. We've been moved from one country to another, unbeknownst to us. Okay? And also, just to clarify, right? The Naturalization Act of 1790, all right? The original United States Naturalization Law of March 26, 1790, 1 Statute 103, provided that first rules to be followed by the United States in the granting of national citizenship. This law limited naturalization to immigrants who were free white persons of good character. Immigrants. It thus excluded American Indians, indentured servants, slaves, free blacks, and later Asians, though free blacks were allowed citizenship at the state level in certain states. It also provided for citizenship for the children of U.S. citizens born abroad, stating that such children shall be considered as natural-born citizens. The only U.S. statute ever to use the term, it specified that the right of citizenship did not descend to persons whose fathers have never been resident in the United States. All right? So Indians does not include white persons. And white persons nor does it include free blacks. All right? So let's go back to the document. I'm going to go back up here again, man, because this right here is the most powerful statement of the day right here. A recent decision in Alaska confirmed this by deciding that an Indian is not a free white person or an alien of African nativity or African descent. Okay? Now, I bet people are wondering, what the hell is a free white person? What the hell is a free white person? What the hell is a free white person? Let's check it out. persons. The acts of Congress which authorize the naturalization of aliens confine the description of such aliens to free white persons. Authorize the naturalization of aliens. But see, once aliens naturalize, then they are no longer aliens. You understand? Then they're U.S. citizens. So you have to understand, if you have not naturalized, then you are an alien. Okay? So free white persons are referencing aliens, okay, who have not naturalized. This, of course, excludes the African race when pure, but it is not easy to say that shade of color or mixture of blood will make a white person. Okay? So, what I'm saying is, because you gotta remember, we're all cousins and we're all family, so we mixed and had sex with each other, and you know what I'm saying, we intermix. So when they say pure, they're meaning like the pure tribes, like you're a descendant of just purely your tribe. Everyone is pure 100%, 100%, whatever, Cherokee, whatever, Choctaw, Seminole, whatever tribe, 100%. That will be pure. But if you're mixed in, you know, like the great melting pot, that's why they call America the great melting pot. It's a melting pot of different genes. All right, of aliens or white persons. All right, so I just want that to be clear. Moving forward. So back. All right. Now, let's continue here. Citizenship has, however, in many cases been conferred on Indians by treaty entered into with the tribe itself or by a foreign government, e.g., the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. Okay? For reference to such treaties, see Part 1, Chapter 1, Section 1A. However, as there indicated, Congress has at different times passed statutes which provide that upon an individual Indian's forsaking his tribal relationships, habits, and customs, and adopting civilized methods of life, he shall be considered a citizen. Okay? New York, July 1879, on Charles Miller's application. This case appears never to have been reported, but it is commented upon in an article by Alexander Porter Morse. Citizenship by Naturalization, in the American Law Register for November 1879, page 673. Mr. Morse states, however, that he has been informed that Young Wing of the Chinese Embassy at Washington and other natives and subjects of the Emperor had been previously naturalized. Since in re Ayuk, the court seemed universally to have accepted the views there taken. In 1878, a Nevada court had reached the same result, and that too without the Ayuk case being before it, but the whole question was, however, put beyond judicial determination by the Congressional Act of 1882, which provided, Section 14, that hereafter no state court or court of the United States shall admit Chinese to citizenship, and all laws in conflict with this act are hereby repealed. So that means all them Chinese people you see are not citizens. Better get that right. Better get that right. The case in Sawyer has been followed quite recently in Ray Hong Yin Chog, 1890, 84 Caliph 163, in which the court refused to recognize a certificate of naturalization granted to a Chinaman by a New York court. The court learned that the certificate was voiced. A federal court in 1895, Inri Jiho, 1895, 71 274, reached a result with reference to a certificate of naturalization granted by a court in New Jersey. So that means that they was giving these Chinese folk certificates of naturalization, and they were not being accepted. They were like, "Oh, what are you here for?" "I'm here to naturalize." "Okay, sure, just go right." "Oh, I'm sorry, we can't offer you naturalization." "Yeah, you're Chinese. We can't offer you that." Now do you understand why they all got their own towns? why they got their own villages, why they got their own businesses, why they hire their own people. Do you comprehend now? The principle that a Mongolian may not become a citizen of the United States has also been recognized in the cases cited and discussed above under the heading Naturalization by birth, where the parents may not become citizens. So therefore, Chinese people are considered white persons. Mongolian people are considered white persons because they're both aliens. Japanese, by a parity of reasoning, the courts have refused to recognize natives of Japan as within the expression of naturalization laws. The earliest case is that of in re Saityo, 1894, 62 Fed, Rep 126, 128, in which it was declared that the Japanese, like the Chinese, belong to the Mongolian race, and therefore that, whether this question is viewed in the light of congressional intent or of the popular or scientific meaning of white persons, or of the authority of adjudicated cases, the only conclusion I am able to reach after careful consideration is that the present application must be denied. They can't be citizens, yo. The same question has very recently been before the Supreme Court of Washington. One Takuji Yamashita, a native of Japan, having applied for admission as an attorney and counselor at law in the courts of that state. The court, citing and relying upon in re Saityo Supra, reached the same result, meaning he could not become a lawyer of the state. They're just going over different type of people now, so I don't want to get too lost from where we was at. Where we at right here? Let's make this small again for a quick. Realize where I'm at. All right. So, Indian who considers the methods of so-called civilized livelihood is a citizen because they've abandoned their ancient traditions and customs. Okay? So let's get into this right here. Make this a little bigger. Okay, so here we go. Section 324 Stat. Act of August 1880. The fact is, Congress exercises complete control over Indians and Indian affairs, and so may legislate in accordance with or opposition to the generally accepted laws on the matter of citizenship. I repeat, the fact is, Congress exercises complete control over Indians and Indian affairs. Because Indians are not aliens of African nativity and African descent. Oh, don't worry, we didn't forget about us Africans here. We're going to keep on moving. Now, Africans. Ooh, I wonder who those people are. No question can be raised under the early laws as to the right of foreign-born Africans to become citizens. The Act of 1790 provided that to be naturalized, the alien must be a free white person. The repealing Act of 1795 had the same provision as did the Acts of 1802, 4, 24, and 28. The Act of 1870 extended naturalization to aliens of African nativity and to persons of African descent. Section 2169 revised statute provides, the provision of this title shall apply to aliens, being free white persons, and to aliens of African nativity and to persons of African descent. This was not repealed by designation in the recent statute of 1906, and inasmuch as it is not inconsistent with the general provisions of that statute, it would seem that the general repealing clause as to the matter is inconsistent would not affect it. Therefore, by statute, Negroes may today be naturalized. Moreover, the 14th Amendment declared in Section 1, okay, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Okay? In the state wherein they reside. And I'm coming back up here because I want you to comprehend. Aliens, meaning foreigners of African nativity, and to persons. You all know persons is an entity. Okay? So they use these words as legalese because they can play the double-edged sword here. They can either be talking about a human being or they could be talking about an entity. Okay? So understanding that we are in the same position as Chinese, as Vietnamese, as North African people or nationals who come here today. We're on the same playing field. We're all aliens because we're foreign to the United States, but when we conduct business, we're in the capacity of free white persons. All right? So we went through this part already. These were the cases. These were the cases. Oh, don't do that. Don't do that. There you go. Okay. We already got through Yamashita. Ooh, Hawaiians. Hawaiians, in the one case that seems to have arisen in the point whether or not a native of the Sandwich Islands might become. Don't be like that. Be nice. Be nice. Let's see here. I think I lost myself again. So. So, let's go. We're going to go right into residence, okay? Persons to age, the preliminary question in a discussion of this topic is what shall be considered to be the residence of one applying for naturalization. The matter has received considerable attention in two New York cases. In the case of Holly, the applicant came to this country when 13 years old, resided here until he was 23, when he declared his... Why is it cut off like that? When he declared his intention to become a citizen. He went to Ireland in consequence of the illness of his father, expressing, however, to his friends and acquaintances his intention to return and live in this country. He remained in Ireland 7 years. When he returned to the United States in 1864, lived a little more than a year in the state of New York and applied for naturalization. It appeared in the evidence that Hawley was an unmarried man and a mechanic working at his trade, wherever he found employment, that while absent in Ireland, he worked at his trade. In delivering its opinion, the court said the last circumstance, the working at his trade coupled with his long absence, is decisive upon the question of residence. There are few questions that come up for the consideration of judicial tribunals, which it is more difficult to define than what will constitute a residence. The best definition that I have ever been able to find, or which my own experience could suggest, and I have had a great deal, is that to be deduced from the Roman law that a man's residence is the place where his family dwells, or which he makes the chief seat of his affairs and interests. A man's residence is the place where his family dwells, or which he makes the chief seat of his affairs and interests, meaning his office of his office within his particular state, nation state. You see what I'm saying? So this is what constitutes as a residence. What are you a resident of? Are you a resident of the federal jurisdiction of the United States, or are you operating from the chief seat? Or are you operating and managing, you know what I'm saying, your affairs and your interests from your particular jurisdiction, your country, your state, your entity? Okay? That's what a foreign state is. A foreign state is an entity. And an alien is a foreigner. Alright? So a foreign state is for aliens. The court refused. Let me see here. I don't want to forget where I was at. There we go. Hawley was a native of Ireland. His parents lived there, and while he was there following his calling of a mechanic, it was, in the words of this comprehensive definition, the chief seat of his affairs and interests. He lost his residence here and was, up to the time of his return, a resident of Ireland. Due to the what? The chief seat of his affairs and interests. That will be called today principal place of business. Where's your principal place what's the principal place of your business? What's your permanent residence? What is your permanent residence? Here's the definition. Your permanent residence is what is the permanent seat from which you handle your affairs and interests. Okay, and due to the fact that this man's affairs and interests came from the seat in Ireland, he was a resident of Ireland. The court refused to grant papers of naturalization. In re an alien, about 1842, in passing upon the residence of one who had been a sailor, said, residence in its legal acception is the place of the party's home or domicile, and not merely the spot occupied by him for the time being. This may be constantly varying, but every change of abode is not regarded as constituting a new residence without the accompaniment of an intention to abandon the former with the purpose of taking up another. It is not within the purview of this report to enter upon the discussion of domicile, but the above statements taken with those that follow in the discussion of the residence of sailors will sufficiently indicate the general attitude of the courts on this matter. Elaborate discussions of the question of domicile will be found in White versus Brown, 1848. You know what I'm saying? These are all the court cases right here. From the earliest statutes, there has been some more or less definitely expressed provision for the continuance of residence within the jurisdiction of the United States during a certain period. Residence meaning, like I said, your affairs and your interests are within the United States. That's what makes your residence. The Act of 1790 provided for the naturalization of one who shall have resided within the limits and the jurisdiction of the United States for the term of 2 years. The Act of 1795 required that the court admitting such an alien should be satisfied that he has resided within the limits and under the jurisdiction of the United States 5 years. By the Act of 1798, meaning before initially it was 2 years. All you have to do is live here 2 years or reside here 2 years, and that'll be enough to be able to naturalize. Now you have to reside here a minimum of 5 years. Okay? For 5 years. By the Act of 1798, the applicant must satisfy the court that he had resided within the United States 14 years. The same language was used in the Act of 1802, except that the period of residence was changed. In the Act of 1804, the language was changed to read, has continued to reside. By Section 12 of the Act, approved March 3rd, 1813, which Act provided for the regulation of seamen on board the public and private vessels of the United States. It was declared that no person who shall arrive in the United States from and after the time when this act shall take effect shall be admitted to become a citizen of the United States, who shall not for the continued term of 5 years next preceding his admission as aforesaid have resided within the United States, without being at any time during the said 5 years out of the territory of the United States. A later act, however, approved June 26, 1848, repealed the words without being at any time during the said 5 years out of the territory of the United States. Several cases arose prior to the Act of 1830 in which the question of continuity of residence was an issue. In Ex parte Walton, blah blah, the affidavit with reference to residence declared that the applicant has resided within the United States upward of 6 years, that during that period he was absent a short time upon business, but left his family in the United States. The court rejected his application because the residence did not appear to be a continued residence and the term of absence was indefinite. Remember, he just said he did what? During that period, he was absent a short time upon business. See, that means he was showing that his affairs and interests are not within the United States. They're out. Therefore, he got rejected. Regardless of the fact his family was there, which is messed up. But that's real. That's law. And I'm going to stop right there because this is a lot of information. I'm going to stop right there. But the biggest thing, you know what I'm saying, I want to get across is that we, as people of African nativity, meaning those who are born today in what we call Africa, and those of African descent who are born of the lineage of Africans. Those who are of African descent are the people here in North, South, Central America who are so-called Negro, Blacks, Coloreds, African Americans, and whatever else they want. You know, you want to call them tomorrow. Okay, so it's not that we are free white persons, but we are aliens, and a free white person is just merely an alien, meaning they are not a citizen of the United States. A Chinese cannot be a citizen. Mongolian, Japanese. Okay? So understand what that means. You have to formulate your own state. Look at the Japanese. Look at the Chinese. What do? They form their own. Cities. They form their own towns, which is a state. That is a state. That is a state. Vietnamese town. That is a state. Mongol town. That is a state. Understand that. Understand that. Understand that. Overstand that. Please, for your salvation, my people, for your salvation. Okay? Now, that being said, that's all I got for y'all today, fam. That's really it right there. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to really drag it out. What I will do is, let's check in. Best thing I can do is check in. Acting a little bit funny right now. All right. We Gucci. All right, fam. You know what I'm saying? So thank you for joining me again. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the love. Once again, I have my paid subscription channel, you know what I'm saying, which goes through a lot of workshops on how-tos in terms of functioning and doing commerce with the United States as a businessman and not a slave. So, I'll have all those links and everything in the description area. So, just keep on staying tuned, keep on studying, and man, let's rise. All right, fam, peace.